I started my own company after my family disowned me. Now my sister, ex-husband, and parents are all showing up begging for jobs. If this story already speaks to you, show some love by subscribing. And please say hi and tell us where you're watching from. I read every comment. The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor of my parents' living room, spraying golden liquid across my navy dress. My sister Keisha stood over me, chest heaving, mascara running down her perfectly contoured cheeks. You sleeping with my husband, Monique? You really that low? The words hit harder than any physical blow. I looked around the room. My mother Diane's face twisted in disgust. My father Jerome shaking his head. My own husband Lance wouldn't even meet my eyes. My brother-in-law Darnell stood in the corner, silent. 32 years of being the family peacemaker, the responsible one, the daughter who stayed close to home in Atlanta while everyone else chased dreams. None of it mattered now. Keisha, I would never, my voice cracked. I'd helped plan their wedding 3 years ago. I'd babysat their daughter Amara every weekend. The accusation was insane, but looking at their faces I realized the verdict was already in. Lance finally spoke, his voice cold and unfamiliar. I saw the texts on your phone, Imo. The late-night calls. The receipts from that hotel on Peachtree. My stomach dropped. What text? What hotel? But nobody was listening. My mother stepped forward, her voice dripping with disappointment that had been my childhood nightmare. I raised you better than this. Get out of my house. The room spun. My father's silence cut deepest. He'd always been my defender. Not tonight. As I stumbled toward the door, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Enjoyed destroying your life. You were always too trusting. K. But Keisha was standing right in front of me. I spent that night in a Holiday Inn off I-85, shaking so hard my teeth chattered despite the room's stuffiness. My phone exploded with messages. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my affair. Screenshots circulated through family group chats I'd been removed from, showing texts I'd never sent, photos I'd never taken. Someone had orchestrated this with surgical precision. Lance filed for divorce the next morning. His lawyer, Janice Richardson, handed me papers at my workplace, a marketing firm downtown where I'd worked for 8 years. My boss, Mr. Peterson, called me into his office within the hour. We can't have this kind of drama affecting our company culture, Monique. Just like that, I lost my marriage and my job in 24 hours. The forensic evidence I begged Lance to consider went ignored. The affair texts came from a spoofed number. The hotel receipt. Photoshopped. I'd been at a work conference in Nashville that night with dozens of witnesses. But rage is louder than reason, and my family had already chosen their narrative. I hired a private investigator named Curtis Webb with the last of my savings. He was a grizzled former cop who'd seen every kind of deception. Somebody wanted you gone, he said after 3 days of digging. Question is why? My sister-in-law Rochelle, married to my younger brother Terrence, was the only one who reached out. Something's off about this whole thing, her text read. Keisha's been acting strange for months. But even Rochelle couldn't risk openly supporting me. Family loyalty was currency in the Baptiste clan, and I was bankrupt. Curtis called me 2 weeks later, his voice tight with barely contained excitement. You need to see this. In his cluttered office that smelled like burnt coffee and old leather, he spread photographs across his desk. Keisha and Lance. At the same hotel from the fabricated receipt. Months before the accusation. Kissing in the parking lot. My brain stuttered trying to process the images. Your sister and your husband have been having an affair for at least 7 months, Curtis said gently. The accusation was a preemptive strike. Classic Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. The room tilted sideways. Keisha had destroyed my life to cover up her own betrayal. Lance had played along, probably hoping to avoid alimony by making me the villain in the divorce. I laughed then, a harsh, broken sound that scared even me. My whole family disowned me to protect her lie. Curtis pulled out more evidence. Bank statements showing Lance had been draining our joint accounts for months, transferring money to an LLC registered in Keisha's name. They'd been planning something, building something with my money. There's more, Curtis said, sliding over another document. Your father's restaurant, Jerome's Southern Kitchen? Is drowning in debt. Your mother's boutique? 3 months from foreclosure. Your brother Terrence lost his job at the auto plant 6 weeks ago. The family was bleeding money, and somehow I sensed this connected to everything else. They needed a scapegoat, I whispered. Curtis nodded grimly. And you were convenient. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I stared at Curtis's evidence for 3 days straight in my cramped studio apartment in College Park. Anger burned through me, hot and cleansing, burning away the people-pleasing daughter I'd always been. They wanted me destroyed? They'd created a monster. I'd studied business administration at Spelman but had been too afraid to use it, too comfortable in my safe corporate job, too concerned with family approval. Not anymore. I liquidated everything. My jewelry, my car, my designer bags Keisha had always envied. I borrowed against my 401k, consequences be damned. $28,000. Enough to start small. I'd spent 8 years in marketing, learning consumer psychology, digital strategy, brand development. I'd made other people rich. Time to make myself rich. I registered Baptiste Digital Solutions on a Tuesday morning in March. The irony of keeping their name while they disowned me felt poetic. My first client was a friend from college, Tamika, who needed social media management for her growing catering business. I charged her half my worth just to build a portfolio. Then her friend. Then her friend's cousin. Word spread through Atlanta's Black business community. There was this woman, scrappy and hungry, who could triple your online engagement in 30 days. I worked 18-hour days in coffee shops, libraries, anywhere with free Wi-Fi. I lived on ramen and spite. Curtis became my first real ally, working for equity instead of cash up front. I believe in revenge plots with good ROI, he'd said with a rare smile. Within 3 months, I had 12 clients and hired my first employee, a brilliant graphic designer named Zara Cardenas who'd also been betrayed by family and understood hungry ambition. Success came faster than I'd dared hope, but paranoia came faster. I knew my family. They didn't accept failure or allow people to thrive without them. I installed security cameras in my new 2-bedroom apartment in Buckhead, started varying my routines, kept my business address private. Smart move. Because they were watching. Curtis discovered the surveillance when debugging what I thought was a computer virus. You've got spyware on your devices, he said, his jaw tight. Professional grade. Someone's tracking your emails, your client list, your bank accounts. I felt violated all over again. We traced it back to Darnell, Keisha's supposedly devoted husband who worked in IT. He'd installed it remotely months ago, probably at Keisha's request. They'd been monitoring me even before the accusation, waiting for the right moment to strike. I wanted to confront them, to scream and rage. Instead, I smiled and fed them false information. Fake client meetings. Fabricated financial troubles. Non-existent business problems. Let them think I was struggling while I secured a contract with Morrison & Associates, a Fortune 500 company needing a complete digital overhaul. The contract was worth $200,000, more than I'd made in 3 years at my old job. I hired 4 more employees. Devon, a copywriter with a philosophy degree and wicked sense of humor. Lance, different Lance thankfully, a web developer who could code miracles. Shanice, a data analyst who saw patterns in chaos, and Jessica, a project manager who kept us all sane. We worked like a unit, like family, the kind I'd always wanted but never had. My team didn't know my history, just that I pushed hard because I had everything to prove. 6 months after the accusation, my mother called. I stared at her name on my screen for 5 rings before answering. Hello. My voice was ice. Monique, baby. He sounded tired, older somehow. We need to talk. Can you come by the house? Every instinct screamed no, but curiosity won. I drove to their Cascade Heights home on a Sunday afternoon, the house where I'd grown up, where family dinners had once meant safety. My father answered the door, and the shock on his face told me everything. He hadn't expected me to look like this. Professional. Polished. Thriving. I'd lost 20 pounds from stress but had gained it back as muscle from boxing classes. My hair was natural now, a crown of coils I'd finally learned to love. I wore a tailored suit that cost more than their mortgage payment. He breathed. We sat in the living room where my life had imploded. My mother perched on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. They looked diminished somehow, older and grayer than 6 months should allow. We wanted to apologize, Diane began, but the words sounded rehearsed, hollow. Things have been hard lately, and we realize we may have been too harsh. Too harsh. I laughed, sharp as glass. You disowned me based on lies. You chose to believe I'd betray my own sister without a shred of real evidence. You threw me away like garbage. Jerome flinched. We're family, Monique. Family forgives. Family protects, I countered. Family believes. Family asks questions. You did none of those things. The real reason for the meeting revealed itself slowly. The restaurant was failing. Diane's boutique had closed. They needed money. Specifically, they needed my money. We heard you started some kind of business, Diane said carefully. We're so proud of you, baby. And we thought maybe, no. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Keisha showed up at my office on a Wednesday morning without warning. My receptionist, Jessica, tried to stop her, but my sister pushed past, her Gucci bag swinging. She looked terrible, roots showing in her weave, makeup caking in the lines around her eyes, designer clothes that no longer fit quite right. We need to talk, Emma. Her voice had that edge it got when she wanted something. I should have had security remove her. Instead, I leaned back in my leather chair, the one I'd bought after signing the Morrison contract, and smiled. I have 3 minutes. Talk. She sat without being invited, and the old Keisha emerged, entitled, manipulative, used to getting her way. Look, I know things got messy with the whole Lance situation. You mean when you fabricated evidence of an affair to cover up your actual affair with my husband? I interrupted, keeping my voice pleasant. Casual. Like we were discussing the weather. The blood drained from her face. I don't know what. Curtis Webb sends his regards, I said, sliding a folder across my mahogany desk. Professional private investigator. Thorough. Expensive. Worth every penny. She opened it with shaking hands. Photographs of her and Lance. Bank statements. Hotel receipts, real ones this time. Her affair documented in glossy 8x10s. You destroyed my life for this? My voice finally cracked. I loved you, Keisha. I would have died for you. Tears spilled down her cheeks, smearing her foundation. He loved you more, she whispered. Lance always loved you more. You were smarter, kinder, better. I just wanted something that was mine. The confession hung between us, ugly and raw. My sister hadn't just betrayed me, she'd resented me our entire lives. Every time I'd helped her, every time I'd sacrificed, she'd hated me a little more for being capable of it. Lance is leaving me, Keisha continued, her voice breaking. The LLC we started, it failed. We burned through everything, Your money, his savings, a loan from some guys who are now very interested in getting paid back. She grabbed my hand across the desk and I let her, studying her like a specimen. I need a job. Something with your company. I can do social media, answer phones, anything. Please. Before I could respond, my office door opened. Lance, my ex-husband, walked in like he owned the place. He'd gained weight, lost hair, and his confidence had evaporated along with his hairline. Monique, you look incredible. His eyes traveled over me in a way that made my skin crawl. I heard you're hiring. I have sales experience, connections in the corporate world. I could be an asset too. Get out. The words came out flat, emotionless. Both of you. Now. Baby, wait. Lance used his old pet name and rage I didn't know I'd been suppressing erupted. I am not your baby. I'm not your wife. I'm not your anything. You conspired with my sister to destroy my reputation, stole from our joint accounts, and humiliated me in front of everyone I loved. And now you want a job. I stood, all 5'6" of me vibrating with fury. You want to know what you could have had? A wife who was loyal. Who would have built an empire with you. Who would have made you rich beyond your wildest dreams. Instead, you chose to betray me with someone who could never be my equal. I turned to Keisha. And you spent our whole lives competing with me instead of realizing we could have been unstoppable together. You wanted what I had. I would have given you half. But you had to take it all and burn the rest. Security arrived then. 2 men I'd hired from Curtis's recommendation. Escort them out. They're not welcome here again. My younger brother Terrence appeared that evening at my apartment. Unlike the others, he'd texted first, asked permission. I let him in because Rochelle had been kind during my exile, and I owed her at least a conversation. He looked good, always had been the handsome one with our father's smile and mother's eyes. But stress lined his face now. I'm not here to beg, he said immediately, settling on my couch. I know what they did to you was unforgivable. Rochelle told me everything Curtis found out. I'm here because you deserve to know the whole truth. I poured us both bourbon, expensive stuff I'd bought to celebrate my first major client. Talk. Terrence took a long drink. Dad's restaurant isn't just failing. It's a front. Has been for 2 years. He got involved with some guys from the old neighborhood. Money laundering, small-time stuff that got big fast. Mama doesn't know. At least I don't think she does. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Jerome Baptiste, the man who'd lectured me about honesty and integrity my entire life, was a criminal. When the operation got too hot, Dad needed to clean his money. That's when Keisha approached him with her business idea, the LLC with Lance. They were going to open a consulting firm, use it to wash Dad's cash. My mind raced, connecting dots. The accusation. They needed me gone because you would have asked too many questions, Terrence finished. You were always the smart one, Emma. The one who actually read contracts and checked numbers. They couldn't risk you noticing the money movements. He leaned forward, earnest. I lost my job, yeah, but I found a new one. I'm doing okay. I'm not here for a handout. I'm here to warn you. Dad's associates? They're getting impatient. The LLC failed, which means their money is gone. And they're starting to ask questions about you, specifically about your new company and whether it can replace what they lost. 2 men in expensive suits showed up at my office 3 days after Terrence's warning. They didn't threaten, didn't bluster. They simply sat across from me and smiled. The older one, who introduced himself as Vincent Caruso, had the kind of face that had seen violence and found it boring. Miss Baptiste, your father has a debt. A significant one. We understand you've built quite the successful enterprise here. His voice was smooth, educated, more terrifying than any street thug. I have nothing to do with my father's business, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my hammering heart. Of course not. You're an independent woman. Self-made. Admirable, truly. Vincent examined his manicured nails. However, family is family. And debts have a way of spreading through bloodlines like hereditary disease. His companion, younger and harder-looking, leaned forward. We're reasonable people. Your company could use investors. Silent partners who expect nothing more than a fair return. Say 30% of your monthly revenue. Consider it protection. I'd watched enough movies to know this was a shakedown, but knowing didn't make it less terrifying. I thought of my team: Zara, Devin, Lance, Shanice, Jessica. People who depended on me, who'd helped build something real and honest. I need to think about it. Vincent smiled, and it was worse than if he'd threatened me. You have 48 hours. After that, accidents happen. Buildings catch fire. Employees get hurt. You seem like a smart woman, Ms. Baptiste. Make the smart choice. They left, and I immediately called Curtis. Then Terrence. Then, surprisingly, an old friend from college named Raymond Price, who'd become an FBI agent specializing in organized crime. I'd kept up with everyone from Spellman, maintained those connections even when everything else fell apart. Now that network was about to save my life. You're describing the Caruso family, Raymond said over the phone, his voice grim. They're under investigation, but we need evidence. Real evidence. If you're willing to wear a wire, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I wore a wire so small I kept forgetting it was there until Raymond's voice crackled in my ear during test runs. You're not alone. We have a team positioned around your office. You're safe. But I didn't feel safe. I felt like bait. Vincent returned exactly on schedule with his silent partner and 2 additional men who looked like they ate nails for breakfast. I invited them into my conference room, offered coffee they didn't drink, and pretended my hands weren't shaking. Have you made your decision, Ms. Baptiste? Vincent asked pleasantly. I have. And the answer is no. I said it clearly, making sure the wire caught every word. I won't be intimidated into giving you 30% of my company. I won't launder money for you or anyone else. My business is legitimate and it's staying that way. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Vincent's pleasant mask cracked, revealing something cold and reptilian underneath. That's disappointing. Your father assured us you were smarter than this. My father is a coward who got in over his head and tried to drag his daughter down with him, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. But I'm not him. I'm not my sister. I'm not anyone you can manipulate or threaten. The muscle to Vincent's right moved, and suddenly there was a gun on the table. Not pointed at me, just there. A promise. Last chance, Ms. Baptiste. 30% or we torch everything you've built. Starting with the people you care about. That pretty graphic designer. Zara, is it? Would be a shame if something happened to her. That's when the doors burst open. FBI agents flooded my conference room in a wave of bulletproof vests and shouted commands. Vincent and his men were face down on my carpet within seconds, the guns secured, rights being read. Raymond appeared at my side, gently removing the wire from under my blouse. You did great, Emma. We got everything we needed. The whole organization is going down. My father was arrested the following day. The footage of him being walked out of his restaurant in handcuffs played on every Atlanta news station. I watched it on my office television, surrounded by my team who'd learned the whole story over pizza and shock. Your family is insane, Zara said, not unkindly. Literally criminal. Former family, I corrected. But guilt gnawed at me despite everything. My mother called 67 times that day. I answered on the 68th. How could you? Diane's voice was raw with tears and rage. He's your father, Monique. You put your own father in prison. He's a criminal who nearly got me killed, I responded, exhausted. He made his choices, Mama. I just refused to pay for them. The Baptistes take care of their own, she shouted. Not when their own tried to feed them to wolves, I said quietly. I'm done being the family sacrifice. I'm done setting myself on fire to keep you warm. Terence was questioned but ultimately cleared. He'd known about the money laundering but hadn't participated. Rochelle called to thank me for protecting them by involving the FBI before things escalated further. Keisha and Lance were facing charges for their role in the scheme, smaller fish but still guilty. The empire of lies my family had built collapsed in spectacular fashion, and I watched it burn without an ounce of regret. But success attracts attention. My story leaked. Local businesswoman takes down mob family that included her own father. Suddenly I was doing interviews, appearing on podcasts, becoming the face of family betrayal redemption. My company's client list exploded. Within 2 months of the FBI sting, Baptiste Digital Solutions had 30 employees and a waiting list. I moved us into a real office building in Midtown, all glass and steel and potential. I promoted Zara to creative director, Devon to content strategy lead, Jessica to operations manager. My chosen family thrived while my blood family faced consequences. 1 year after the accusation that destroyed my old life, my family came crawling back. Not individually anymore but together, a united front of desperation. They appeared at my office on a Tuesday morning. Diane, Keisha, Lance, even Terence and Rochelle. My receptionist called up, voice uncertain. Your family is here? All of them. Should I send them up? I'd known this moment would come. I'd practiced what I'd say, rehearsed my boundaries, prepared for every manipulation. They filed into my conference room and the contrast was staggering. They looked defeated, diminished. I looked powerful. I'd earned every inch of that power. Diane spoke first, her pride clearly choking her. Your father is in prison for 3 to 5 years. The restaurant is gone. The house is in foreclosure. Keisha and Lance are facing trial. Terence is struggling with just one income and Rochelle's pregnancy. We're family, Monique. We need. Let me stop you right there, I interrupted, standing at the head of the table like the CEO I'd become. You need money. Jobs. Salvation from the consequences of your own actions. And you think I, the daughter and sister you destroyed without hesitation, should provide that salvation? I looked at each of them in turn. You taught me valuable lessons. Keisha, you taught me that jealousy can corrupt even blood bonds. Lance, you taught me that the person sleeping beside you can be your worst enemy. Mama, Daddy, you taught me that parental love is conditional and easily revoked. Thank you for those lessons. They made me ruthless enough to survive. Tears streamed down my mother's face. Keisha looked at the floor. Lance had the audacity to look angry. So this is revenge? Diane whispered. You're going to watch us suffer? No, I said softly. This is boundaries. This is self-preservation. This is me choosing myself for the first time in my life. I pulled out envelopes I'd prepared, one for each of them. These contain recommendations for social services, job placement programs, and financial counseling resources. Everything you need to rebuild, legitimately this time. What they don't contain is money, jobs, or access to me. I placed my hands flat on the table. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because carrying hatred is exhausting and I have an empire to build. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean forgetting. It means I'm choosing peace over revenge, boundaries over bitterness. I stood straightening my suit jacket. I wish you well. I hope you find honest work and rebuild your lives. But you'll do it without me. I died the night you destroyed me in this very room. The woman standing before you is someone new, someone stronger. Someone who knows her worth and won't accept less than she deserves. As they filed out, Keisha turned at the door. I'm sorry, Imo. For everything. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't undo the damage. It just means you finally understand what you lost. The door closed behind them and I stood alone in my conference room, looking out over the Atlanta skyline. My phone buzzed, a text from Curtis. New client inquiry. Fortune 100 company. They specifically asked for you. I smiled, pocketed my phone and went back to work. The Baptiste family had tried to bury me. They didn't realize I was a seed. Now I was a forest, vast and untouchable, my roots too deep to ever be torn out again. And I was just getting started.